Zarina Matcha here. Today, as per the title, I'm going to be talking about mental health, and I'm also going to be doing the chronic disability tag. I'm making this video to discuss mental health, my experiences with mental illness, specifically panic attacks and alcoholism. Question 1 is, what chronic illness or disability do you have? Do you have multiple? In September of 2016, I started university for the second time, and I was diagnosed shortly after starting with depression and anxiety with panic attacks. And it was also around this time that I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous to embark on the 12-step program. So it was obviously a lot of changes were happening. I was self-harming quite a bit, like cutting myself. I did all that kind of stuff, and it was a very, very rough time for me. I'd say struggled. I would say my depression peaked between the years 2013 and maybe 2016, but last time I did something extremely self-destructive to myself. So there were 2 instances that happened in 2018. So we'll start from 2016, because 2016 for me was a very pivotal year. It was the year I dropped out of the University of York and at the same time applied to the Academy of Contemporary Music to do a degree in songwriting and creative artistry. And that was the year that I started going to AA. It was the year I also got into a very, very toxic and emotionally abusive relationship. May and July, I broke up with them in July. So it was just a couple of months, very, very brief, very intense. We saw each other almost every day. Very, very sick, troubled guy. So my 3 young adult novels and Every Last Psycho and Around Midnight, there are echoes of this relationship in all of them. Around Midnight is very, very explicitly about this relationship. When you go through a kind of trauma with somebody and there's sexual trauma involved or emotional trauma, the impact that it can have on you, you can't underestimate that, because that experience pretty much kickstarted my whole ongoing love affair with panic attacks. So me and him were obviously together midway through 2016 and broke up. Shortly after we broke up, I think I had, or it might have been just before, but I tried to go 2 months without alcohol. And because my relationship with alcohol was a very toxic on and off again relationship that lasted just over a year. It started around mid-2015 when I started to kind of drink alcohol by myself. I had panic attacks before 2016. The ones I remember 2 instances. So there was one when I was in 6th form, which would have been in 2015. And I was just sitting there, and suddenly the whole room was kind of like, it just kind of glazed over, and I just fell off the chair and was on the floor. Yeah, it was really strange. Like, I don't think anybody really knew what was going on. I think a few people were concerned. One guy on our table, for some reason, he just started kicking me, and like, not in a horrible way, but he was like, not in a hard way, but he was just like saying, "Oh, Zarina, what are you doing?" Like, I think they just thought I was, I don't know, acting out or something. But yeah, I went home, and I remember I would have these feelings quite a lot in school of suddenly things going just feeling almost like disconnected from reality. I don't know if that was partly because of my depression. I don't know if that was because of being a teenager, struggling with insomnia, any of those things. But I would say it definitely there was like the kind of early beginnings of signs of panic attacks for me. And there was another time in York, so this was late 2015. It was during the Freshers' Fair. And I remember I was walking around and suddenly my head just went like that. And next thing I knew, I was like just on the floor. And then afterwards, my face was lopsided. I was very like this. I couldn't move properly. I was like really, really strange. Some people apparently thought I was like on drugs or something. One of the mental health care people, I can't remember the term, but she said that, I think you had a panic attack. And I didn't really understand what that was, because I don't really understand panic attacks. And then it wasn't until late 2016 when they became, and I don't remember the first time I had one, but I do remember this one day. So it must have been sometime in September, and I was in one of my lectures, and I was sitting there, and suddenly I just froze, and then I just started screaming out of the blue. I just started yelling and shouting, and like I was like this. And it's really strange. The reason why I think it had a lot to do with my previous relationship is because something happened in that relationship whereby I was very, very traumatized. And just so we're clear, it was not, what happened wasn't illegal, but it was very traumatic for me. I might have made this connection, but I didn't really talk about it much to people. I didn't tell anybody what happened in detail until I started telling a counselor I was seeing at ACM in 2016. So between, say, for about a good 6 months or so, I don't really tell anybody what what the whole thing actually was that happened. It kind of just started off so, and then once it started, it just kind of seemed to keep on happening. I'd just be in a situation, I'd be shaking, throwing things. I just felt I was just very erratic and very unpredictable. And this plus starting to go to AA, I went through a period, I think it was just like a week or so, where I was like smashing up glass, and I got in trouble with the police because I tipped over this recycling bin, which was full of glass bottles, and I started smashing them on the ground. And what I know now, all of this was essentially one big anxiety outburst, and my anxiety was manifesting itself in big ways. And by the way, the police were really, really nice to me. I don't know, I mean, I don't know about other countries, but British police, in my experience, are way too polite. I was completely acting like a little shit, and they were just like asking me like, oh, okay, so what's going on? And I was saying, oh yeah, I'm 4 days into AA, and they were just like, okay, so she's 4 days without a drink, she must be a bit frustrated. Probably they were used to other drunks hanging around, drunks, ex-drunks, whatever. Yes, so after that incident, I remember I went to the police were going to take me into custody, but because I had glass in my foot, they took me to the ambulance, and I was sort of coming back to normal, and I was talking to the ambulance lady, and she was very, very kind, and she was saying to me that she could see that I was quite genuine, that I was, you know, intelligent and stuff. And I was saying that I was really scared because I was like, I want to do my music and I want to write books and I have all the ambitions and stuff, and I'm scared that my mental health and everything is just I'm just spiraling out of control. That's how I felt. I felt like I was just losing control. A good few weeks after this incident, I remember I was in hospital again, and I think I threw something in the waiting room. I think I threw a chair. I was just so erratic, and like they took me to the hospital, and yeah, the doctor like there and then she diagnosed me with depression and anxiety, and I was prescribed citalopram. I started on a very low dose, and then it gradually increased, and then around 2018 I switched from citalopram to sertraline. Question 2, so have you had your chronic illness or disability your entire life? The depression, I would say, was prevalent when I was a teenager. I'd say it was probably from the age of about 14 to 19. I had a depressive episode in early 2019. That's the last time. I did experience a very mild depression in 2020, but it wasn't self-destructive, if that makes sense, and I was still able to function. But I would say my panic attacks were a big problem from like the end of 2016 to the present. And obviously alcoholism was just between 2015 and like 2016, so it was just over a year, very brief. Number 3, what healthy coping skills have you learned because of your disability? This is why I'm going to talk about AA, because AA, and I actually want to do a whole video about this at one point, but AA is the thing which really, really changed my life for the better. Spending 4 years going to AA meetings, I learned things like how to accept things I can't change, how to let go, how to practice forgiveness and compassion, not hold on to things that are not in my control. Because the thing is, a lot of people worry about things that haven't happened, or worry about the future, or worry about what people think of us. But the thing is, these are not things that are within our control. We can only worry about the things which we have control over. So I have control over how I treat people. I have control over how I carry myself, but I don't have control over what someone thinks of me. I can treat somebody nicely, but I have no control over how they're going to treat me. And it really doesn't make any sense to worry so much about, oh, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? Because it's like, we have no control over another person's actions. So that's something I learned a lot. And also things like practicing meditation, prayer, becoming more spiritually inclined. And also I've had to really learn my limits on things. Like, for example, with panic attacks, something that I've come to realize is that I'm very physically overwhelmed by external stimuli because I'm very, very highly sensitive. And when we say somebody is sensitive, I don't mean that like somebody says a mean thing to me and I start crying. That's rather pathetic. When I say I'm sensitive, I mean in the sense that I'm sensitive to external stimuli. So anything like trains or things moving past me like this, if I'm ever out in public and there's a siren, I will always cover my ears. I'm very, very sensitive to external things. And it's really strange because I like going to nightclubs. I like roller coasters. This is why sometimes it's hard for me to kind of, I'm still trying to understand my panic attacks, because they are quite unpredictable, because I can be in a nightclub surrounded by people moving around and feel fine. And I don't know if that's because if I'm in a good mood, maybe that affects it. Like if I'm feeling cheerful and if I'm moving around already, like if I was to just stand still and people were moving around me, then I would probably feel very, very unsettled. But if I'm like moving and dancing, as I usually am, I'm kind of going with it, if I'm enjoying the music. Of course, I'd say being on medication has helped. I know that some people don't like medication, but for me, being on medication has been a massive help. So number 4, do you apply your experiences to your writing? Absolutely. So my novel, Every Last Psycho, I wanted to write about mental health. Actually, it kind of started because I was studying, when I did A-level psychology, we did a whole module on mood disorders, and I kind of knew that I was going through some kind of depression, and I was seeing a counselor, but it wasn't like diagnosed. And I think part of me just thought, oh, maybe it's just a teenage phase. Maybe it's just because things are hard at home. I didn't make so many connections that there was some kind of genuine problem. And I think a lot of it does trace back to my childhood experiences of being bullied, because I spent about 7 years being bullied from the ages of 4 till 11. It wasn't like every single day 24/7, but it was definitely an ongoing thing. That's why I say it was throughout the whole of primary school, which was 7 years, reception till year 6. So my novel Anne, there's so much of my experiences in there. Anne's father is kind of the personification of my drinking, because he's an alcoholic, and I actually remember at times being drunk while writing parts of that story, because I was working on it early 2015 when I was at York. Yeah, that was the first time I actually started to work on it ever since coming up with the story as a kid. My whole struggle with alcoholism, with feeling very dependent, that all went into the character of Anne's father, and he was like the personification. Almost like how in Misery, Annie Wilkes is the personification of Stephen King's cocaine addiction. Cocaine, alcohol, pill addiction. Every Last Thought talks about like schizophrenia and depression and codependency. I don't have schizophrenia, but what I do have is empathy. And I think whatever you're struggling with, whether it's schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, panic attacks, they all in a way come together, because it's all essentially something which almost separates you neurologically from people who don't have that. Although I do personally believe that in a way nobody is 100%. Everybody's got something, I think. Even the most cheerful of people have something, I believe that. And there's even things like the self-harm in Every Last Thought. And in Anne, actually, there's one character. Her name is Simone, and she's very, very much based on me. Her whole personality, her attitude, she's very bubbly and chatty, and she plays guitar, but she's also struggling a lot, and I put a bit of it at the end note of Anne. And the same goes with Around Midnight, of course. So my whole experiences with this very unhealthy guy came out a lot in Around Midnight. It's really strange, because in Around Midnight, the main character, Megan, she comes from a very nice family, and it's like me, like coming from and these things kind of made me feel a bit strange as well at times, because if I put my bullying aside, I had a very happy childhood. I came from a lovely family. My parents, up until we were like teenagers, my parents were very, very happy together. Me and my brother are incredibly close. Like, we had a very happy childhood. There were so many good experiences, and so that makes me think sometimes, why would I go through all this stuff? And I honestly think that maybe it doesn't matter, because I'm sure there are so many people in the world who have had good childhoods and good upbringings and good families and still had some kind of trouble. Because the thing is, just because you've had a good childhood does not mean the rest of your life is going to be perfect. Question 5, how does your chronic illness or disability alter your writing routine? It honestly doesn't really have much of an effect. I guess, yeah, if I'm depressed or whatever, I'm less likely to want to write. How does it impact your writing style, topics, characters? I think I've covered that. So writing about mental health is important for me. And even in my Kirk University series, I've taken great pains to write about things like OCD and ADHD. Again, I spent so much time in AA around so many people who are going through so many, just all kinds of things. You accumulate all of this information and insight into the human condition, and just, it makes you realize how similar we all are and how we're all so interconnected. You realize that things like skin color and gender and sexuality really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor or white or black or brown. Obviously, it's really sad, you know, if you've had difficulties based on the color of your skin, if you've experienced things like sexism or racism. I know that's a very hard thing to go through, and it also seems in this day and age it's a very socially acceptable thing to overly complain about. And When I say overly complain, I don't mean like candidly speaking about some of your experiences. I mean saying things like, oh, I walk down the street and people are like looking at that black person. And I just think to myself, I actually have a poem about this in my book, Single Broke Female, called Race, Gender, Class. And it's so funny because it's like very, very easy for someone to look at me and say, oh, as a black woman, I'm sure you've struggled so much. And I look at them and I think to myself, you have no idea what I've had to go through by having panic attacks. Panic attacks have affected so much of my life. They've made it difficult for me to get a normal job. They affect me all the time. As much as at the time of filming this video last night, which is actually why I wanted to film this, because last night, so I was out clubbing with my friends and, you know, having a really good time, and I was very tired. So I thought, okay, I'll go and have a Red Bull. So I had a Red Bull and oh my God, it like suddenly everything just went so alert and everything felt very sharp. It literally felt like, and I've never taken any drugs apart from weed and alcohol, so I don't know exactly what this feels like, but it did feel like I'd taken a hit of cocaine or something. Suddenly I just came alive. And because everyone was dancing and moving around, you couldn't really tell. And, you know, I was moving and I remember some girl like fell into me and I just like took her hand and like span her around and just started dancing with her. Like, it was wild. It was so great. I finished the Red Bull and I remember the bottom of it was really disgusting, but I had this compulsion to drink it, which is how it used to be for me with alcohol. I'd want to not drink it, but I just feel compelled to drink it. And I ran over to the bar and I just randomly started doing star jumps. Like, I couldn't stop. I was doing star jumps. I was jumping up and down and I was very aware. And I just thought, okay, I hope if anyone sees me, they just think I'm like on something or something, because it's like, and I was thinking, is this normal? Is it normal to feel so overly perky from this? So I was like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna have another one. And I kind of had a sense that maybe 2 was too much. I was already sensing this, and it was a really strange deja vu because it reminded me so much of the times when I'd be out and I'd be drunk and I would be, you know, unable to just stop buying drinks and knowing that I shouldn't be, but just not able to stop this compulsion. So thankfully I did just have 2 and I did feel pretty great. I felt so hyper, and then obviously the crash hit me and oh my God, it was awful. I was sitting down at a table drinking water and I was just looking around the room and I just had all of these really sad thoughts like, oh, I'm such a weirdo, I'm an alien. Because this is the thing, I really have spent so much of the last several years feeling like a social outcast as a result of my panic attacks and my alcoholism. I can't tell you the amount of experiences I've had where I've been in a public place like a train or a shop or a club and I've just collapsed because of overwhelm, and then people just come running around you. And by the way, just to let you know, if anyone ever has a panic attack around you, the worst thing is to crowd them. You just want 1 or 2 people gently just soothing, very, very, very calm. When you have people crowding, saying, are you okay, you okay, you okay? Somebody was shining a light on me and I was literally like that. And I started shouting things about my ex, my toxic ex from 2016. And I was shouting things about him. And it was like, I think that maybe it's because I was talking about it with my therapist recently. And there was just so much going on in my head. And it was just so overwhelming in the worst possible way. I got so wound up. It's weird because when I get into these states, it's like I switch and I become something else. And I remember like one point, like I tried to run out the club, I tried to run out into the street. I mean, thankfully somebody pulled me back because I don't know what I could have been hit by a car. Like, that's the thing, when I've had these anxiety states. I remember again this one time when I was at uni in Guildford, I was randomly doing my laundry and my housemates were both sitting at the table and we'd had a bit of an argument and I was already feeling unsettled because of the argument. And then I think I found like a spider in my underwear drawer and I was like having a panic attack. And I was like unable to and then I came down with my laundry, put it in the machine, and then I just lay down. I was lying on the floor and I was going, I'll never be whole again. I'll never be whole again. Like, there's all of these weird things and it almost feels like it's not me. And essentially what it is, it's just a very, very severe breakdown of anxiety. That's what it is. I'm not psychotic. I don't hear things or see things. It's just such a extreme form of anxiety breakdown. I've been taken home in taxis. I had this job in 2018 where I worked for Wembley. I worked at Wembley Stadium in London. I couldn't do the job because I just collapsed. It was just so embarrassing. Like, The thing is, I know that for other people it's like, oh, it sucks. But for me, like, no one's judging me for it, but I find it so humiliating because I try and go about my life being seem quite refined and well put together. And this is all in my poetry, by the way. My poetry book, Single Broke Female, I have a poem about this called If I Was in a Wheelchair. And it's like, if I was somebody who externally looked disabled, like if I was in a wheelchair, people would see, oh, okay. But because my illness is very much inside of me, and if I didn't have a panic attack, you would not think that. This is the whole thing, really, about things not always being what they appear, and people are not always what they seem, and things can seem like they're all fine, and people can seem very well put together, but that's not always the case. So number 7, what about your chronic illness has surprised you? The horrible way in which it's impacted my life. I did not expect panic attacks. It's changed my life so much. Like, it's really made such a big difference living with this unpredictability. And even though it's been getting better and things have been improving, and I think a lot of that has to do with me working on my purpose, doing my YouTube videos, my writing, feeling more comfortable in myself, meditating a lot, swimming regularly, being on benefits as well, feeling like you're the person that people are, always worrying about, like, oh, is Zarina okay? What's wrong with Zarina? Like, that's not a nice thing to kind of go through, to feel like people are just looking at you. And like, there's 2018, I had an incident where I took an overdose of my citalopram. I think I took like 16 tablets. It was not a suicide attempt, but it was just a very, very dark thing. And shortly after that, I switched to sertraline. So in late 2018, after this breakup happened, like earlier in that year, I'd already taken that pill overdose. So this happened, and it was a very brief love affair. I was head over heels for him, and he was just such not a good guy. He just did not care about me, and he actually partly broke things off with me because of my panic attacks, because at the time I was working at Waterstones in the UK, which is the last regular person job I had. I was working as a bookseller, and I had a panic attack, and I messaged him saying, oh, I had a panic attack at work, can I come and see you? And he didn't respond, so I just thought, oh. And again, I was not in the right state of mind. I went to his house, I knocked on the door, I was sitting outside for ages, and then he didn't come out, so I assumed he was asleep, or maybe he heard me and was just pretending to be asleep, which I wouldn't put past him. But I called him later, and he sounded so irritated. He was like, why did you do that? Why did you come to my house? He didn't even ask if I was okay. He just sounded so annoyed. A couple of days later, we broke things off, and it was just very, very sad. And I was so distraught. I went through this very self-destructive cycle. I started cutting myself. And it was not just because of him, it was also because I was feeling so frustrated because of my panic attacks. And I just felt like so useless. I was like, oh, all people do is worry about me, so what's the point of me existing? After this whole incident happened, I filmed a video on my other channel called Life is a Circle. It's very significant that after that all happened, and I went and filmed this video, and I think that was the universe's way of bringing me out of that to kind of settle. And thankfully, like, 2018 is the last time I say I felt suicidal. I would say, yeah, last 2 years I've not had any suicidal thoughts. I've had depressive episodes, but I've not felt suicidal. So question 8, how did your family react? My family, very, very worried. Of course, I imagine, like, I don't have kids, but I can't imagine how awful it must feel for a parent to have to watch their kids go through something like that. They were just all really concerned, and they're very, very supportive. Most people are very supportive. They're very understanding. My mum has been so amazing throughout all of her. She recognizes, like, during the first lockdown, it was hard for me to go outside. I couldn't do shopping because if I tried to leave the house, I'd have a panic attack. So I basically I could go jogging or I could go for a walk with her, but I couldn't go to the shop, basically. Shopping is something which is very, very stressful for me. I mean, I avoid doing grocery shopping as much as possible. Mainly it's my mum and brother who mainly do grocery shopping. I do some of it sometimes because I like to be helpful, but it is very, very stressful for me. Question 9, what do you celebrate about your illness? I was inclined to say nothing, but I guess the fact that in a horrible way, having this illness, living with panic attacks, has meant that I've been able to get benefits. I spent a lot of 2019 applying for jobs. I must have applied for about 50 jobs. I had 3 interviews. Got none of them. The third interview, I had a panic attack in the interview, And so thankfully somebody who I know was also struggling, and he helped me fill out the PIP and Universal Credit Disability Premium form. And I was able to get that money in 2020, and it has been so helpful because it's thanks to that I've been able to actually grow my business. And there's been times when I feel almost bad, like, oh, I'm going out and I'm doing stuff, and it's like, oh, other people are going to work. But it's like, my friends say this, like, I am working. And one of my really, really good friends actually said to me, like, see it as you're getting paid for the work you're doing. Slowly making money from my books now since doing the Diana Vale project. The fact is that me being on benefits has allowed me to do this because, you know, I would have been, if there was no panic attacks, I would have been perfectly fine to get a job at a shop somewhere 3 days a week. I actually thought that was what I was going to have to do. I always kind of thought, okay, if I want to do music and writing, I know that I'm going to have a job as well. Something I don't care about, something low maintenance. That's actually what I wanted working at Wembley Stadium. And obviously I wasn't able to do that because of my panic attacks. And finally, question 10, my favorite form of self-care is swimming, I would say. Swimming is, I've always loved swimming, but swimming is something I've done consistently since mid-2018, actually. I try and swim twice a week if I can. That's something I missed. I'd say that's probably the thing I missed most during the pandemic, during the lockdown, the swimming. Swimming, and I'd say meditating as well. So anyway, thanks for watching this video. Let me know if you want me to talk more about my panic attacks or anything, if there's anything you related to in the video. It's very hard to talk about, but I want to do these kind of videos. Thank you for watching. Okay. Okay. Okay.